2009, they missed the defense expenditure by $5.8 trillion, which is pretty significant. So their figures are rather rosy, but he said in this report, he said, look, I've heard all this stuff about health care. I've seen what you've given me, but what I have to do is work with actual numbers. And I'm telling you that this is going to add $1 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. And he said it's impossible to take 35 to 45 million people and essentially put them on welfare and say that that somehow saves money. It doesn't. But anyway, that's just another nail in this coffin. So $12.5 trillion of debt, and after this year, which ends in September, it's supposed to be 14, they predict. But that doesn't include our indirect debt. And I'm not talking about the off-budget items that we talk about, like this CBO officer said that, for example, Social Security has $15 trillion of unfunded liabilities in it. Medicare has $36 trillion of unfunded liabilities, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about indirect debt that's not part of the budget, and it's not part of that $12.5 trillion figure, but it's due right now. Some of those things would be Fannie and Freddie. You know, the federal government now has 90% of the residential mortgage business in the country. Fannie and Freddie has an unlimited fund that they can draw from to cover these losses. Hundreds of billions of dollars are going into this hole. And the other mortgage companies like FHA and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Association, same thing, hundreds of billions of dollars each. FDIC is essentially bankrupt and needs hundreds of billions of dollars to keep depositors from panicking. The Pension and Guarantee Corporation is in serious trouble and is essentially bankrupt, but it has a solution. It's going to take your retirement pension and use it to buy government debt. That's the new thing now, the retirement 401ks, the whole thing, these private pension funds, these gigantic pension funds that the various unions have. You know, the auto workers pension fund owns majority interest in General Motors now. The government's new thing is, look, you guys got a tax advantage to build this fund, and it's only fair that you would give some of that back by investing in the government. So we want you to buy government debt, basically, to invest in treasury bills. And we'll give you an annuity each year in return for that when you retire. There's $41 trillion out there that the government is trying to get its hands on. And there are many other things like that. The state and municipal governments have $2.3 trillion of debt right now that they can't pay, that they're on their knees begging the feds to take over for them. Those are some of the things that we face, and it's some of the realistic possibility that's coming our way right now, not 10 years from now, but right now. And it's a very dangerous situation. It would cause a worldwide cataclysmic event. I mean, a cascading series of defaults all over the world. That's one reason why it's different this time. It's never been worldwide before. The Japanese economy is totally tied to ours. They would be in the same situation we're in as far as their ability to pay short-term debt, except they have our treasury notes. They have $793 billion of U.S. treasuries that they could call at any time, and only $717 billion of foreign debt. So they're, relatively speaking, in pretty good shape, but if we default, then they do too. So they're basically helpless. But the Chinese are in a little bit different situation. You know, almost $2 trillion of U.S. debt they hold, and essentially they're not dependent on us to avoid default. And so, you know, it's always a wonder. I mean, I'm amazed at why President Obama wants to constantly, as they say, step on the dragon's tail. I cringe when I see some of those things. This meeting with the Dalai Lama, why do that? Why sell $6 billion of weapons to Taiwan, which you know can only infuriate those people for no real reason, and many other things that have happened recently. Basically little Oriental insult type things that the Chinese don't particularly like. So, you know, we tweak them almost as if it's intentional. We double dog dare you to call these treasury bills, you know, that kind of thing. Well, guess what? For the first time in history, the last 2 months, the Chinese have been a net seller of U.S. treasuries, not a net buyer. They've sold $34 billion worth of them net recently. Now, that doesn't even tell you, we haven't even talked about this budget that we're living under now that's being proposed to start at the end of September, this 2010 fiscal year budget that Obama's proposed. He proposes $3.8 trillion of spending, and he estimates $2.2 trillion of revenue, which is optimistic because revenue is falling right now due to a failing economy and people being out of work. When people are out of work, they can't pay taxes. When they don't pay taxes, revenue goes down, and the deficit goes up, which has to be added to the debt, but it's just not that simple. I mean, someone has got to loan you that money. They do that by buying your debt right now at an extremely low interest rate. And they do that. How is all this possible? Well, the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And what that means is a lot of private individuals around the world hold the dollar as their security, their safety, because they believe in us, in the full faith and credit of us, the American people. Number two, it means that foreigners, foreign countries who make things will ship those things to us in exchange for dollars rather than demanding that we ship them things, of which we don't have very many right now because they've all been offshored to China and Japan and Bangladesh and Indonesia and Mexico, India, and everywhere else. So those are some things that are fueling this fire right now. And see, if you think about it like this, what's going to have to happen in order for the United States to sell this debt? Interest rates are going to have to rise to make it, to give an incentive for foreign nations to buy this debt. That's already happening. They sold a few $1 billion worth the other day, and the interest rate had to gradually work its way up. This all adds to the debt and makes paying it less possible. Well, back to the Congressional Budget Office, he said that his projection was that by 2020, the end of his 10-year projection, the debt would be at $25 trillion. And he said by then, by 2020, it will take all of the revenue of the United States, which, by the way, he estimates will increase by 100% in that 10 years. But in other words, instead of being $2 trillion, it'll be 4.4, or roughly 4.5. He thinks that's going to happen, even though it's actually falling right now. But it will take all the revenue that the United States can generate to pay interest on the debt and to cover the payments due then on what he calls entitlement programs. If you look at some of these entitlement programs, as he puts it, they are some of the largest items in the budget. What are the 5 largest items in the budget? Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, defense, and interest on the debt. Those are things that can't really be changed, not by any Democrat or Republican anyway. But if you look at those things, it's kind of, I always kind of raise my eyebrows when someone calls Social Security an entitlement program like it's something dirty. Most of us work our entire lives and pay our income into it, but the government's not willing to give it back to us. So why is that? Why should we feel bad about asking for that money back? Right now, by the way, Social Security, as of this year, has gone negative. In other words, it's drawing